Though they aren't as well known among fans as their planetary neighbours, the Trandoshans were one of the fiercest species in the galaxy, renowned for their bloodlust, strength, and relentlessness. Nearly every Trandoshan was a hunter of some fashion, and like all hunters, they took great pride in their weapons. Much like the Wookiees, the Trandoshans had their own unique arsenal of weapons, largely because they lacked the manual dexterity to use blasters meant for humanoids. Trandoshan weapons varied from simple swords to slugthrower-like ACP guns, and in this video, we'll be taking a look at the whole arsenal.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Trandoshans had 3 fingers per hand, which were thick and tipped with huge claws. These were meant for hunting and were quite effective in combat, able to tear deep trenches in the flesh of most humanoids. However, their fingers weren't quite so useful for delicate tasks or for careful manipulation of weapons. Trandoshans had awful manual dexterity, and as a result of this, they couldn't use most kinds of blaster. They had to rely on weapons that were specifically designed for their use. The Trandoshans made many of these weapons back home on Trandosha, but a number of weapons companies, most notably Arakyd Industries, catered to Trandoshan clients due to their prevalence as bounty hunters and assassins. Hunting and killing were extremely important to Trandoshans, and the reason most went into violent work was because violence was a core part of Trandoshan religion. The Trandoshans worshipped a goddess they called the Scorekeeper, whom they appeased by earning Jagannath points, which determined their place in the afterlife. The higher their score, the better their fate would be. Trandoshans accrued Jagannath points through successful hunts, earning points for trophies taken from prey and for every being they killed or enslaved. They believed Wookiee pelts to be especially valuable to the Scorekeeper, which, alongside millennia of jealousy, was a major driving force behind their constant harassment of the Wookiees. Because of all this, the Trandoshans placed special importance on their weapons, and they tended to favor ones that would earn them more kills. Like their Wookiee rivals, the Trandoshans had a predilection for swords. They tended to prefer primitive blades over vibro swords, seeing the increased skill wielding them required as a display of prowess. Many Trandoshan swords or double blades were made of chalon, a rare ore that made them sharper and heavier than your average blade, allowing them to kill quickly and efficiently in the hands of a strong Trandoshan hunter. Battle axes were also a favorite of some Trandoshan thugs, and Trandoshan slavers often used long, specially made knives, which they often wielded in pairs. These slaver blades were extremely dangerous in the hands of the agile Trandoshans, who could use them to gut opponents who got too close in the blink of an eye. Of course, the Trandoshans also used plenty of ranged weapons. During the old Sith Wars, Trandoshan slavers developed the Slave Master Stun Carbine, a non-lethal weapon that was powerful enough to reliably stun Wookiees, which they used to keep their slaves in line. A more lethal favorite of the Trandoshan slavers was the Trandoshan Hunting Rifle, an ultra-precise blaster rifle made for long-range hunting. These highly durable weapons were designed for use in undeveloped environments, making them an easy pick for Trandoshans looking to go on expeditions into the forests of Kashyyyk. Other Trandoshans relied on primitive slug throwers, which were easier to maintain in rugged conditions. In general, slug throwers were a favorite of the Trandoshans, likely for the same reason they preferred more primitive swords over vibroblades. All the weapons we've mentioned thus far were designed by and for the Trandoshans. However, during the Clone Wars, many Trandoshan groups instead got their weapons from Arakyd Industries, a secretive corporation that was infamous for playing both sides of the war. During the war, separatist-aligned Trandoshan privateers bought most of their arsenals from Arakyd, which mostly sold them ACP weaponry. ACP stood for Accelerated Charged Particle, which was a variety of energy weapon that functioned like slug throwers, appealing to Trandoshan sensibilities. The most common of these was the ACP array gun, which was essentially a type of short-barreled shotgun.
Shotguns? I didn't think anyone used projectile weapons anymore.
When fired, the ACP array gun would spew out energized particles like buckshot, making it devastating in close combat, usually able to kill all but the most heavily armored or well-shielded enemies in one shot at close range. At medium range, it could seriously wound multiple targets at once, and at longer ranges, it was less effective. These Trandoshan shotguns could carry up to 8 cartridges at a time. These cartridges had to be manually reloaded one by one when the chamber was empty. ACP array guns were a favorite of Trandoshan slavers who preferred ambush tactics and close quarters combat, and they were also used by non-Trandoshans, including members of the Onaka gang. Seasoned Trandoshan mercenaries instead preferred ACP repeaters, sometimes nicknamed the Trandoshan chopper. These were essentially submachine guns, and they were a notoriously cheap and somewhat low-tech design with a built-in fire extinguisher for use when the weapon overheated, which was often. These clumsy weapons featured much smaller cartridges than the array gun, the casings of which were ejected after every shot. ACP repeaters had a capacity of 40 cartridges, which were stored in blocky magazines that were inserted into the back of the weapon. The ACP repeater, as its name suggests, had an extremely high rate of fire, spraying out energy particles in concentrated bursts. These weapons were meant for medium range and were devastating against energy shields and organic targets, though they were much less effective against droids or armor. The ACP repeater was fully automatic, making it an imprecise weapon, though not to the extent of the array gun. It also had considerable recoil, and when it overheated from sustained use, it tended to become even less accurate than normal. Despite its many flaws, however, the ACP repeater was a powerful weapon, and the Trandoshan mercenaries who used it earned many Juggernaut points. The power of the ACP repeater, however, paled in comparison to its big brother, the LS-150 heavy ACP repeater. These monstrous weapons were like portable turrets, carried only by exceptionally strong Trandoshan elites. These behemoths were much more powerful than Arakyd's other ACP weapons, firing much more powerful shots than the regular ACP repeater at an even higher rate of fire. The heavy ACP repeater was belt-fed, with each ammo belt bearing 200 rounds that were usually expended rapidly. These weapons produced a constant stream of fire that could shred organics and droids alike, and for good measure, they came with meter-long bayonets on their front, allowing their wielders to skewer enemies that got too close. Another Arakyd product used by Trandoshan privateers was the LJ-50 concussion rifle, a medium to long-range weapon that fired concussive energy charges, which exploded upon impact with a target. The LJ-50, like the other Arakyd Trandoshan weapons, was rather cheap, and it only had the capacity for 10 shots, but it was nonetheless a devastating weapon, able to take out multiple enemies with every shot. The LJ-50 was also equipped with an energy bayonet, which was highly effective against droids. Clone Wars era Trandoshan mercenaries also made use of Arakyd-made multiple missile launch turrets, which were stationary but easy to deploy. Trandoshan MMLTs fired anti-armor rockets which could obliterate entire squads of infantry and cripple light vehicles. These weren't as powerful as the Wookiees' own rocket turrets, but they were devastating nonetheless. The Trandoshans liked to use the MMLTs to cover narrow corridors where there was no room to evade the turret's rockets. The final piece of the Trandoshan privateer's arsenal was a fast attack dropship, which might have also been produced by Arakyd. These unusual craft featured long flight decks that elevated at a 30-degree angle when the craft landed, for unknown reasons, which was connected to a bulkier base section. Trandoshan dropships required a crew of 2 to operate, presumably one pilot and a co-pilot/gunner. It's unknown what weapons, if any, the stock versions of these dropships carried, as their weapons complement appeared to be completely customizable. Each dropship could carry 30 mercenaries and their equipment. This was equivalent to the Republic's LAAT gunship, despite the fact that the Trandoshan dropship had roughly twice the internal volume as the LAAT. Mercenaries could deploy from these dropships without them landing by rappelling down to their designated landing zones, or they could wait to deploy until the craft had landed. So that's our look at the Trandoshan arsenal. But what do you think? Which weapon is your favorite? The LS-150 heavy ACP repeater is ours, based purely on cool factor, though we'd probably prefer the ACP array gun for actual use. But let us know what you'd pick in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.